Hello, hello, hello. It is me, your True Heel Phenom SP3. We are back with another exclusive interview for Tru Heels BTR Between the Ropes. This time we have an award-winning TV host. He is Spectrum Sports 360 reporter and the host of the Living the Gimmick Podcast, pro wrestling host and journalist himself, Jon Alba. Thank you for joining us, good brother.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you bringing me in. And normally when I do these kinds of things, I got like my nice mic set up. Maybe I'll throw my Emmy in the background just to heal it up a little bit. But I'm at a car dealership right now to get an emergency car tune-up. So I appreciate your flexibility, and I'm excited to chat.
Yes, we love when we can have someone who's a part of the wrestling media and especially one of the best like yourself. So I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking any free time that you have. I know you're a busy gentleman, so I appreciate the time as always.
Of course, thank you for the kind words.
So for you guys watching, give this video a thumbs up, share it with all your wrestling fans and friends. We're going to get to know Jon Alba a little bit more. If you've only been following on Twitter or you've heard his name break the latest wrestling news, you can learn a little bit about him with this video. And of course, the icon down at the bottom, you can push that to subscribe and the bell below that to stay notified for all the great content right here on Tru Heel Heat. So first of all, Jon, I have to ask you, we are a wrestling YouTube channel. We're a wrestling podcast. So we want to know, as always, with anyone we speak to, how did you discover this crazy, crazy world of professional wrestling?
Yeah, isn't that kind of the question that everyone wants to know about their fellow wrestling fan? I refer to it as the Big Bang moment.
Yes.
What moment did it all make sense? And I don't know if I can think of one specific moment, but the general time period would have been around the summer of '97, when obviously Stone Cold Steve Austin is really hitting his stride and the Attitude Era is about to really get going. And it might have been probably around the time of Austin stunning McMahon. I think that was probably, I saw that. I was, transparency's sake, I'm 27 going on 28 years old. So I was 4, and like, and I remember my next door neighbor had been a big wrestling fan, and she was younger too, and I'd go over there. She had an older brother, and it'd be on, and we watch it, and I remember just seeing that and being like, that is really cool. And as time went on, especially in that era, probably not the best thing for like a 4 or 5-year-old to be watching, but and when I'm asking my mother questions about the kind of pie that the Rock likes, that's probably not the best thing to be asking. But yeah, man, I mean, I was hooked from that point on, and been around ever since for me.
So rolling off from that question there, 1997, it's been getting a lot of talk as of late. I know Dave Meltzer has a book coming out or a book that's out, Wrestling Observer, the playbook for 1997, and he coins it as the most important year in professional wrestling. Now, you discover professional wrestling in that year, but looking back on it, do you consider it the greatest year ever in professional wrestling?
I think when you're talking about historical significance, it absolutely is. And you think not just about WWF hitting its stride at that point, but WCW was the thing then. And you've got Goldberg and Goldberg Rising. Sting is doing his program with Hogan at that point. The undercard with guys like Malenko and Guerrero and Mysterio. It was so transitionally hot. And obviously WCW would find ways to screw that up at Starrcade in '97. But yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue. You've got the ascension of The Rock, the ascension of Austin, and the Montreal Screwjob. So '97 is certainly full of it, and it's cool to be able to trace your fandom back to that.
Yeah, that's a great year to kind of start it off for you for sure. So tell us a little bit about your background, where you from, and like your family. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I was born in New Jersey, just on the outskirts of New York City, and I grew up in the middle of Jersey, right by Rutgers, kind of central Jersey, which very much exists for those who disagree with that. But
Well, I got my sister out there, so no worries. I'm
yeah,
right there
where's
with
she
you.
at? Where's she at?
She actually worked a little bit at Rutgers, but she lives in Carteret.
Carteret. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, that's probably about 15, 20 minutes from where I grew up. So I was out there and went to school in Connecticut. Worked my first 3 years on air in Bangor, Maine, because when you do sports reporting and on-air hosting and all that, you go to a small market. And I went to market 156 out of 210, and I did my 3 years in Bangor, Maine, and around 2018, made the move down to Orlando, where my work can now be seen on Spectrum News 13 in Orlando and Bay News 9 in Tampa. I host a half-hour sports show, Spectrum Sports 360, as you spoke about. It runs 7 nights a week on our station. I host it probably 2 to 3 nights a week, and then when I'm not hosting it, I'm a sports reporter, so I'm doing long-form human interest stories about sports. Pro wrestling is one of the areas that I cover. I think that's one of the misconceptions when people see some of my pro wrestling reporting, that they think I'm only a pro wrestling reporter. Pro wrestling is actually a very small portion of what I cover ultimately. And then I've been doing the Living the Gimmick podcast with my co-host Doug McDonald for the last 5-6 years now. So yeah, that's kind of my resume condensed.
Well, that's awesome. So what is like the sports that you kind of got into first that kind of introduced you to that sports reporting world?
I'm one of the very fortunate people that I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life when I was 5 years old. April 17th, 1998, it was the New York Yankees home opener against the Oakland Athletics. And I believe the score was something like 17-13. And if you're a baseball fan, you know that's not a typical normal score that you'd see in a baseball game. And it was just, I mean, we're talking height of the steroid era here. So everyone's just hitting bombs. And I'm like, I want to be the guy that talks about that one day. So that was kind of my groundwork. That was where the path was laid for me. And I did work at MLB Network as a producer there for a bit. So baseball is very near and dear to my heart. But I like most sports, I'd say, generally speaking. Some more than others, obviously. But I'd say generally baseball is probably where the foundation for me got laid.
So are you a Yankees fan? I want to keep us together, keep us eye to eye here. Are you a Yankees fan?
Yeah, so I grew up a Yankee fan. I grew up a Yankee, Giants, Nets, and Devils fan. When you're a sports reporter, you kind of check your fandom at the door, and you're desensitized a little bit. So I can get just as much enjoyment out of watching a Padres-Rockies game as I can a Yankee-Red Sox game. But I did grow up a Yankee fan in the height of the dynasty, and I actually grew up friendly with Tino Martinez's family. So that was a really cool experience growing up. And, just being around those dynasty Yankees was, an amazing experience.
Awesome. So we got to trace it back to the professional wrestling world. I know you said that it's kind of a small market, but how did you what was your first introduction as far as reporting on professional wrestling, and when did it really become a bigger part of what you're doing?
Sure. Well, it's a really cool dynamic that I get to experience where I cover pro wrestling, but I also work in pro wrestling, and I've been a heel manager throughout the New England independent scene for the last few years. I've done talent and called shows and whatnot, but reporting, I want to say it was probably 10, 11, 12 years ago, something like that I think I was just doing kind of like some freelance, just column writing for PW Mania, I think it was, just to get some practice and get some reps in. I'm a firm believer that in anything you want to do with journalism or broadcast or whatever, maybe reps are the key. So I was like, okay, I'm 17, 18 years old, whatever I am. I'm going to try to get some reps here. And in hindsight, those columns are garbage, but it's a good way. And I was definitely doing some Bleacher Report stuff back when Bleacher Report, anyone could write for Bleacher Report. But I started to more consistently cover it around 2013 I helped start WrestlingRumors.net with my co-host Doug McDonald and Chris Cash, who used to be involved with WrestleZone, and a few other folks. And we sold that off. And then that kind of piggybacked into Living the Gimmick and just continuing to cover that. I think pro wrestling journalism is very hit or miss, where you have a lot of really good people like Sean Ross Sapp, Nick Houseman. There are a lot of really good people out there that I can name. Connor Casey, people inside the ropes. I think Dave Meltzer, for the most part, is just one of the most incredible sports journalists I've ever followed in my life. And then you also have to them, and I'm not afraid to call them out on social media, as I'm sure you've probably seen, but the news sites with the Z, the people who make up news, the people who pass off sexy pictures of female wrestlers as news, so there's a really big juxtaposition there. So yeah. I feel a responsibility as an actual journalist, someone who covers real sports for a living, not pro wrestling or anything, but I feel like there's a bit of a social responsibility to ensure that we be better as a pro wrestling community that covers pro wrestling. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand on that front.
Yeah, I mean, you really have been at the forefront, especially this year with so much going on as far as like the whole pandemic era, the COVID-19 scares with WWE. How has it been like this year covering professional wrestling for you?
Insane. Just absolutely insane. I kind of lucked out to be in the right place at the right time, where that I'm in Orlando with WWE being right here. And there's just been so many things that have happened in the last year where, me kind of using my reporting expertise, like actual journalism expertise, where I've been able to kind of finagle those hard stories. And like I said to you, I kind of have that interesting position of like where I work in pro wrestling, but also cover it. So you need to be very careful about avoiding conflict of interest when you're doing that. I'm not the kind of person who likes to report on what's going on in storylines or what's going on. Let's do a rumor killer, that's not really my game. I more care about the hard issues. How are pro wrestlers being affected with these COVID protocols? What about where are they going to be performing? What is the circumstance with this independent contracting stuff? Harder stuff. I mean, you may recall I reported on the Florida Super PAC that was established, the America First Super PAC, where the money was being brought into Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. So I feel like that's kind of where my expertise more fall.
Yeah, I mean, you've really kind of hit on the harder to talk about issues, not only with WWE, but as far as like AEW. How would you, from a journalist perspective, how would you describe like the way they have kind of handled the pandemic on either side of WWE and AEW being so close in the Florida area and kind of seeing it firsthand?
I mean, I think AEW has done a better job. I think anyone can see that with a brain, honestly. AEW's been much more progressive towards it. The question has to be, though, at the end of the day, can you efficiently run pro wrestling in the middle of a global pandemic? And I've been kind of saying from the start that I didn't really think so. I think as we've gotten to this point, we've kind of figured out how to do it. But it's a huge risk inherently that you're taking. AEW's been doing COVID testing pretty much from the start. There were a couple of weeks where they were figuring out what to do, and they had that very closed set, and that was very risky of them to do. The reality is, at the top of WWE, for a lot of this, you've had COVID deniers. And I'm just being real here. And I say this not as me opining, but this is stuff that I've had pro wrestlers who work in WWE tell me and all that. And it's gotten better, and I'm glad that it's gotten better. And WWE's been significantly more responsible about it in the last 3-4 months. And I'm happy to see that, because that's the only way it should be running. But, to this point, we saw these massive outbreaks, and they were massive outbreaks. AEW has had outbreaks, too. The size and scale, not so much. They had one fairly big one that Sean Ross Sapp and I reported on, but outside of that, they've been a little more responsible, I'd say. But it shouldn't be said about, comparing one versus the other. It's a general responsibility that everyone has to take up on the mantle.
Of course. And kind of everyone has to kind of be extra cautious with what's going on, especially with everything that has transpired in 2020. And it's been a very, very crazy year outside of wrestling, of course, as well. So where do you see wrestling going after this whole pandemic? You know, we're getting vaccines in the UK that's being passed. It's being talked about here in the US as well. So where do you see it going in the future?
I think the way that we experience pro wrestling as a live audience is going to change significantly. I don't believe that we are going to see WWE especially ever hit the road like it did in the past. I think the long weekend loops are gone. I think those days are over with. I kind of made this bold prediction that I think eventually this Thunderdome setup is pretty much exactly what WWE will strive for, where you have a more permanent production facility that you can bring on the road if you want to, that you aren't really you're bringing the fans to you, rather bringing yourself to the fans. Yeah. And it will save a lot of money. As we've seen what has happened with WWE this year, they've saved a ton of money. So I see that kind of being the future of pro wrestling. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or not, I don't know. But I do see that as being the future. And I think, you'll still get your live TV tapings in front of audiences for the most part, but I suspect we will see a big shift.
Yeah, we know WWE is moving into Tropicana Field now that they're moving out of Amway Center with the original Thunderdome. And it's been a lot of talks about bringing fans in for the Royal Rumble. But more importantly, I think a lot of fans are concerned about if we're going to have fans at WrestleMania. Where do you see that outcome transpiring?
Yeah, I do think we'll see fans at WrestleMania. I kind of reported on this a few months back, maybe in October. But I fully expect WrestleMania to be at Raymond James Stadium this year in Tampa. I expect there to be fans there. Will it be full capacity? I don't anticipate that. But I do believe it will be something along the lines of 40% capacity, maybe anywhere from 25 to 40% capacity. Just my guess. That's my intuition. Using what the NFL has been doing for model, what Major League Baseball did for the World Series, and living here in Florida, where if WWE wanted to, they could run a 70,000 person show at Raymond James Stadium. Now, is that the smart, responsible thing to do? No, it is not. I do suspect we will hear an announcement relatively soon about WrestleMania moving. I think there are some legal things that WWE probably wants to figure out with the city of Englewood in California, but I do suspect relatively soon we'll hear.
All right, so I have to tell you to take your journalist hat off for a second here. We want to know the wrestling fan in you. So I got a couple of rapid fire questions to kind of get to know you a little bit more.
Let's do it.
What is your favorite match of all time?
Favorite match of all time. I don't know if I have one singular favorite match, but a few that stand out to me. Rock Hogan at WrestleMania, which is not by any means a classic bell to bell, oh my goodness, but to me The Rock was so larger than life at that time. And if you want to know just a master class in how to take an audience and engage them, that is certainly right up there. I think the Okada Omega series is just incredible, and Dominion, the first Dominion match, the draw, was one of the most incredible spectacles I've ever seen in my life. And then Okada Omega 4 was maybe the bell to bell, the greatest pro wrestling match I've ever seen. So those are all outstanding. I was in attendance for the Gargano and Cole match at NXT TakeOver New York. The 2 out of 3 falls match.
I was there as well.
You were there as well. So I mean, you being there as well, you can attest that was a special match to see live. And I was in attendance for Bayley and Sasha at TakeOver Brooklyn. So those are just a few that stand out to me.
Definitely, I would totally agree with the last two. I was there live for both of those, probably the two greatest matches I've ever seen live. I'm a huge fan of the Okada Omega, so I can definitely agree with you there. And I think I've said it before on Twitter, the Hogan Rock. If there was ever a match that deserved 5 stars for crowd reaction
Yeah,
alone, it's that match. So
very
I.
much.
I can definitely see why you say all of those for sure. Your favorite wrestler or wrestlers of all time?
I mean, growing up, as I just said, I was enamored with The Rock. I thought The Rock was just incredible, and his charisma and personality and ability to think on his feet was so eye-opening to me, and it's something that I strive for today. When not just I'm in a pro wrestling ring, but even on air doing my day job, being able to think on your feet and be quick-witted. The Rock is probably my number one. Kane is up there. I love Kane, man. I thought Kane was just one of the greatest big men in the history of pro wrestling, and so like I think we look at Kane as a legend, but like I still think his career is underrated at the end of the day, and I don't think he gets the due recognition that he deserves. Um, and yeah, I mean, look, you love the Ric Flairs, you love the Austins, you love all of those guys. So yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to single out people, but The Rock immediately comes to mind for me.
So, with your background on the independent scene, being a heel manager, your favorite manager of all time, or managers?
Sure. I mean, I can tell you this: the two people I draw most inspiration from when I'm out there is it's Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette. Cornette, it all draws back to me. There was a big bang moment for this too, and I realized I could do that. Was I was interviewing Billy Gunn, and he looked at me and he goes, you have a very punchable face. And I said, you know what? I think that's my meal ticket. So I'm fortunate that I do have an Emmy award, and I use the Emmy award as heat. Uh,
Absolutely.
I have an Emmy, therefore I am greater than you. You are not as accomplished as me because I have an Emmy and you don't. And it's unique. So channeling the cadence of Paul Heyman, and when I'm out there in the ring, or on the outside of the ring rather, I'm definitely more Jim Cornette, frantic, running around. I'm a coward. So, and ultimately, you want to give the audience an experience where they want to pay money to see you get your ass kicked. So, um, that's kind of where I draw my inspiration from, I think.
The greatest event that you ever seen, whether live or watching it on TV?
Yeah, that's tough. Live, WrestleMania 30 was an incredible show, and I was there for that. Obviously, the streak ending, Daniel Bryan winning the Triple H and Bryan match was an amazing match to open
Yeah.
up WrestleMania. That's probably the best major show that I've been to live. Um, I'll tell you, I was at Fyter Fest, the first one. I thought that show was just awesome. Uh, I've been to so many great independent shows. It's hard to kind of single out that, but WrestleMania 30 has a soft spot for me. WrestleMania 17 is probably the one wrestling show I've watched the most of any pro wrestling show. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of my top list there.
Okay, so this is an interesting question I have for you. Since you mentioned Daniel Bryan being there for WrestleMania 30, Mike, I say like my favorite wrestlers of all time is Shawn Michaels and The Rock, but the person I feel the most connection with is Daniel Bryan because I got to see him in Ring of Honor in Hammerstein Ballroom here in New York, and then rise all the way to the top of WrestleMania. Who is that wrestler that you kind of seen start from the bottom and then make it to a great achievement in their career?
So what's really cool for me working in pro wrestling is I get to work with a lot of independent talent, and I apologize if you're having a hard time hearing me. Someone just turned on a leaf blower like right now. The cool thing about working independent wrestling is that you see so many of these talent that they rise to the top right before your eyes, right? And
Yeah.
for me, one of those guys that it's just been so gratifying. There's two that come to mind for me. One being Darby Allin, who I worked with several times in Limitless Wrestling and in New England in general. And Darby, I think, is Jeff Hardy, man. I mean, he's got every bit of it, and he's incredible. I got to know John Silver really well in Limitless, and just seeing what he's doing now. I didn't love what Dark Order was doing with him at first, but now they've let him be him, and he's incredible. August Gray in WWE, formerly Anthony Green. August Gray just kind of made his debut in the last couple months or so, but
Yeah.
I know Anthony very, very well, and that's quite literally a boyhood dream coming true, and no one deserves it more than him. So those are a few guys for me, and it's so cool to see them, achieve their dreams.
Love it. Love that answer. So this is Tru Heel Heat. We love our heels on Tru Heel Heat. So who is your greatest or favorite heel of all time?
Favorite heel of all time? I mean, people are going to say Bobby Heenan, and I certainly would not disagree with that. Heenan, man, there's so many great heels. Man, I think, man, your guy. I think Daniel Bryan's heel work was just incredible, and like people
Absolutely.
won't remember Daniel Bryan for his heel work, but like that, I think CM Punk was an outstanding heel. He really, I mean, whether it's his Ring of Honor run at the end there or what he did in WWE between the Straight Edge Society and then what he did obviously in his top. Jericho's an all-timer for me. And I mean, right now the reality is MJF is the future, and I know there's going to be people who are like, oh, no, MJF is the future, and he's a very special talent, and he's going to be someone that I think we will be talking about as an all-timer 20 years from now.
I can agree with you there. Like, I feel like he's one of the best in the game right now. Just his ability to talk and get heat from a crowd is just amazing. And my final question for you, since this is Tru Heel Heat, the greatest heel moment you have ever experienced live being in the professional wrestling business or just watched in your entire fandom and being a journalist. What's the greatest heel moment you've ever seen?
I mean, I think anytime I step in the ring, it's the greatest heel moment that pro wrestling's ever seen. But
great answer.
outside of that, man, I mean, everyone's going to obviously point to like Bash at the Beach and everything where Hogan turns, but I was a little too young for that to see that live. My favorite heel stuff, I love the Festival of Friendship with Kevin Owens was like an all-time great segment. I really do. I think, man, on the spot it's kind of hard to come up with stuff, but I think that is up there. I think some of the stuff that Brock has done in the past few years, people just crap all over Brock, and that's not fair because Brock is just incredible. And I think some of the stuff he's done in the past few years, his work with Taker in like 2015, it's just incredible heel stuff. Were you at the SummerSlam when the two of them faced off at Barclays? I was there.
Yes, I was.
I was there too, and that moment where they stood up and the laugh, I mean that's a moment I'm never going to forget as a wrestling fan, so.
True.
I think that those are kind of up there for some of my favorites.
Yeah, you were there live for him ending the streak, which is, in my opinion, that's one of the most shocking.
That is a heel moment right there. That is for sure. So, Paul Heyman's face in that moment. I mean, that is one of the most, I'll tell you, man, I've covered the NFL playoffs, Major League Baseball, the NBA playoffs. Nothing is going to be like being there for that in terms of raw audience emotion, and that is an all-timer.
For sure. So finally, tell the people that are watching this interview a little bit about the Living the Gimmick podcast and everything else you're doing, and where they can find you, of course, on social media.
Yeah, well, the Living the Gimmick podcast, as I said, it's a podcast both Doug McDonald and myself have been doing. And in the last couple of years, we've added Josh Eisenberg, formerly of Chairshot Reality. Many of you may be familiar with Josh's work on Chairshot Reality, to our team, and Josh is just the best. I love Josh, so it's so great having him on team with us. We drop our podcast every Tuesday morning. Drops wherever you listen to podcasts. We are 268 episodes in. We've been doing it weekly every single week since 2015. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Living the Gimmick, where we do a ton of bonus content, including watch-alongs. We just did a watch-along of Survivor Series 2002. And those watch-alongs on Patreon and all of our Patreon work is all uncensored and unfiltered. So if you want to see me step a little outside of my comfort zone, it's kind of fun to do that. So you can check that out, patreon.com/Living the Gimmick, or subscribe to the regular podcast. It drops every single Tuesday. And I'm, as I said to you before, down here in Orlando, in Spectrum News 13, Spectrum Sports. You can find me on Twitter at Jon Alba, JONALBA. Drop the H because H's are for losers, so we don't need that.
Get that heel heat, man, for all the H's.
Yeah, and I also co-host the Limitless Wrestling podcast, which, for those unfamiliar with Limitless Wrestling, it is truly one of the very top independent promotions in the country, based in Maine, of all places, but very much one of the top in New England. And we have the Vacation Land Cup show, which is going to be streaming on IWTV December 19th. And just to put things into perspective here, the last two Limitless Wrestling champions, MJF and Anthony Green, who went on to become August Gray. And now we have a vacant championship, and chances are whoever wins it might be destined for some stardom. So definitely worth checking out December 19th on IWTV.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Jon, for joining us. If you can, just give them your social media handles as well, so they can follow you, because you break a lot of news on the Twitter world. I see you all the time, and I follow you because you know what's going on in the wrestling world.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Again, on Twitter at Jon Alba, JONALBA. On Facebook, Jon Alba, multimedia journalist. I post to there as well. And if you want to look at me on Instagram and just want to stalk me and be weird, that's cool. You can do that too. Jon_Alba on that front. I got that blue check mark, so you know.
Exactly. You're one of the important people.
Allegedly. I don't know if I agree with that, as I do this interview from a Hyundai dealership. But yeah, so I appreciate that, man, and thank you for giving me your time today as well.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jon, for joining us. Of course, guys watching at home, ladies, put your thumbs up for this video, like this video, share this with all your wrestling fans and friends. And of course, the iCard down at the bottom, you can push that to subscribe, and the bell below that to stay notified for all the great content right here on Tru Heel Heat. It is me, your Tru Heel Phenom SP3. This has been Tru Heels BTR Between the Ropes with Jon Alba. We are signing off until next time.